Back here I'm working on the Spitfire. Previously I explained that we're going to make a profile to suit this portion of the inner rear wing, because then what I can do is I can get that piece fastened on between here and down here, now that we know that we've got a start and a finish point, and we have the panel that's going to go on to match it. So what we're going to do, we're going to take a very quick measurement of the size of return that we're going to be looking to deal with. So I'm getting about 22 mil there, so if we allow 20 mil, and then over the back there we've got around 15. So we're going to cut a strip at 35 mil, put a fold up it, and then we can start looking at doing some shrinking and stretching and start getting a shape to roughly where we need it to be, and then we'll finish it with the planche and hammer over the anvil. And then we can look at start getting that cut out and put back in again, because that's no good. So move that out of the way. What did I say? 35 mil. Mark up one side, because thankfully the treadle guillotine has a square block on one end of it, which makes things a lot easier when it comes to guillotining nice thin strips off like this, or anything for that matter. So double check the square block. Now this guillotine is a little bit naughty in the sense that it's not, the guards for it exist largely in the operator's imagination. So you keep your fingers well out the way, and hopefully common sense prevails. You might have to censor some of this for the HSE. What they don't know won't hurt. So we've got a strip, 35 mil, or a little bit over I think it is, but that's not going to do any harm. Yeah, 35 and a half. About 36, so we can live with that. That's not a problem at all. So next thing to do before you do any real work with stuff like this is get rid of that block. So I'm just going to nice and gently run down either side and take that burr off. I can realise that this particular piece of material isn't long enough. It's pretty close, but I don't think it's long enough to do the full section of the arch that we're wanting to do. So we'll likely have to either build another piece into the end or another piece down here. But what I'm going to do is mark up on either end 15 mil to begin with. Bloody phones are going mad. So we'll put a mark there at 15, and we'll put mark there at 15 millimeters. So what we do is just get a bit of a straight edge mark to it. Doesn't have to be too accurate. There's going to be a lot of this that's going to be done by eye, and if it looks right, oftentimes it is right. Now that we've got it marked out, if you'd like to follow me over here, we have one shear press brake and slip roll. Under there we've got our rolls, press brake and a shear at the bottom. We don't really use it much for the rolls, don't really use it much for the shear, but the press brake, particularly we've been able to change out the top tooling to get the right sizes on some of the returns, has been a brilliant addition to the workshop. You fold up to about 1.2 fairly comfortably, depending on how wide a piece you're working with. But on stuff like this, so this is 0.8 material that we're working with at the moment. So I'll bring that down just so the V's just on the mark, and then I'll bring this down to suit, because we get a little bit of a rock over the top tooling, which can sometimes make it a bit tricky to set up, but other times it can be a bit of a blessing in disguise. Just make sure we're lined up on the back there, and then we can move that right the way down, and just make sure we've gone all the way with the other side. Just give it a bit of a rock backwards and forwards. And there we go. And we've got a nice ever so slightly under 90-degree bend, which is absolutely fine for what we're doing, and we can soon work with that. But you may have noticed as well, we've got a piece of aluminium backing in there. just to make it a little bit easier on some of the thinner gauge stuff. It makes it that much nicer when you're working with the likes of 0.8. So now what we can do, now that we've got our folded section, in here is the sort of alignment arrangement that we're looking for. So we know that we've got a nice landing for this return to sit onto, and we've got a nice area with a bit of slack in this corner, so we can work it round and then fabricate this section as it joins into the rest of the arch. So what I'm going to do is just very quickly sort of assess the sort of shape that we're going to be looking at, and it looks as if over the top side of the panel, certainly to start with, until we get to around here, this part is actually flat in this direction and just has the curve going that way. So it's going to be easier for us to start mocking this up coming from this end. So what we'll do, we'll just plunk that in and go, right, so we wanted a nice gentle curve to start sweeping in. We're going to go over to the stretcher, confirm, yep, along this edge. And we're going to give it a, we're not going to go mad, just going to give it a little bit of a tweak every 3/4 of an inch to an inch or so. And the nice thing about this is it's such a controlled way of getting a bit of a curve into something. So I'm just going to work it back where I've just been and get a bit of a sharper curve into it. And it's quite nice because we've got the stretching jaws set up on that one and the shrinking jaws set up on this one here. Excuse me. So we can very quickly alternate between the two. So look at that straight off the bat. So what? 20 seconds worth of stretching, and we're not a million miles off. Probably a little bit over there. So I'm going to go back over. Almost just let the weight of my leg do the work on this one. So that's just pinching it together a bit more, and that's brought the curve a little bit more shallow. So I'll put that back in now, and we're not a million miles off here. But what I've noticed, we need to be bringing just a bit more of a portion here, so a little bit more of a curve over this area. Come back over to the stretcher. Run a straight edge from where it's going to be fastening on. So that's where it's going to be fastening. So we've got this teeny tiny little section here, which is just unfortunate because I just didn't have quite enough length on the 0.8 material to begin with. It just means that we've got to fill in this gap in the corner. Not the end of the world, but one of those things that are sent to try you. I reckon Stevie Wonder would be pleased to see that. Can you tell me when you're filming?
Filming now.
Hey. Oh, hello. So, what I'm going to do is loosely mock it up, and just based off a very quick cursory look, it doesn't look as if we're too far out on the shape, and it should be lining up pretty nicely with the bottom part of this inner quarter repair section. So what I'm going to do is just loosely hold that in position, and certainly for this part here, which isn't actually too bad, only starts getting really shitty from sort of here. We'll be right back. Let's try it again. Please wait. Oh, thank God. Right. So it only starts getting really quite shitty from sort of here down. So you see where I chalked originally where I was going to be cutting it out. So I think I'm going to essentially just follow on from that. So we're going to be cutting down there from the new stuff. Now we should be in a reasonable position. I'm going to clean these edges up and I'm going to trim that down to suit this little bit of an overlap we've got. And I should be able to get it tacked on here and get it somewhere tacked on down here. I'm not necessarily going to finish it down here yet, but certainly enough to trial fit the panel to make sure that all the alignment where we want it's starting to work. So next thing I'm looking at is roughly how much I'm going to be trimming off here. So if you want to come around this side of me, you see just the sort of arrangement we're looking at. So at the minute because we've made this to go to the end of the new panel, so we've got a 10mm worth of overlap of the new material. So I've got to trim that off, and then we're ending up roughly in that sort of an area, which I reckon if I trim this back and just get that loosely tacked on here, we should be able to trial fit the panel and just make sure that we're not too far away. So just going to get a bit of a tack on there. There we go. So we've got that loosely on, and I'm not going to force it anywhere. I'm just going to lift it up to that panel to see roughly where it lands nicely, and I'm just going to get a bit of a tack on there. Oop. Get one there, and that is roughly in position. So I'm going to just pull that up. Get a tack there. Not finishing it like that, that's just to hold everything in place. So now we've got a real nice finished edge of the arch. So what you'll have to do now is join back with us next week to find out whether it fits.